There is a seed sitting in your kitchen right now that a 500-year-old empire treated as sacred, and that a European power once tried to wipe off the face of the earth. Not burn a book about it, not tax it, erase it. Punish the farmers, outlaw the fields, let the memory die. You sprinkle it on oatmeal. Your grandparents grew it as a novelty pet. But before it was a health fad, before it was a joke on late-night television, this seed fed armies, paid the taxes of a civilization, and was pressed into the body of what they believed to be a god that people then ate. This is the history of Chia, and it is far darker than the label admits. So let us walk through the door. It is the year 1519. You are not in a museum, and you are not reading about this in a book. You are there. The air is thin and cold because you are more than 2,000 meters above the sea, on a plateau ringed by volcanoes. In front of you is a city that should not be possible, a capital built on an island in the middle of a lake, laced with canals, connected to the shore by long stone causeways. Its name is Tenochtitlan, and on this morning it is larger than almost any city in Europe. You follow the crowd toward the market, and everywhere you look, you see the same small gray and white speckled seed. It is stacked in woven baskets. It is ground into flour. It is stirred into water with a little lime and drunk by a runner about to cross a mountain. It is pressed into oil and painted onto the faces of what they believed to be gods. It is counted, weighed, and set aside as tax. The people here call it Chien or Chian. We will call it Chia. And to the empire around you, this seed is not a snack. It is one of the 4 pillars that hold up the entire world. Remember that word, pillar, because in a little over 1 lifetime, men will arrive across that same lake, determined to pull this pillar down, and they will very nearly succeed. To understand why Chia mattered, you have to understand what it stood beside. The people we now call the Aztecs, more properly the Mexica, built their diet on 4 crops: maize, which we call corn, beans, amaranth, a bright, tiny grain, and chia. Historians have pointed out something remarkable about this. A diet built from just those 4 foods comes startlingly close to meeting modern nutritional guidelines. These people were not surviving, they were engineering. Chia, botanically, is Salvia hispanica, a member of the mint family, a cousin of the sage in your spice rack. Soak the seed in water, and something strange happens. It swells and wraps itself in a clear, thick gel. That gel is the secret. It let the seed hold water and energy in a single, portable package. The perfect fuel for a people who had no horses and no wheels for transport, and who moved their entire empire on human legs. So the warriors carried it. The messengers, the runners who sprinted relay routes across the empire, carried it. A pouch of chia and a mouthful of water could keep a man moving for a brutal day of travel. Some say the very name carried the idea of strength. The honest answer is that the documented meaning of the Nahuatl word is closer to oily, for the seed's rich oil, and that the strength story came later. But you can see how the legend grew. When a food is what fuels your soldiers, strength is exactly what it feels like. Then there was the money. The Mexica ran an empire on tribute, forced payments from conquered towns, and the records that survive are almost unbelievable. According to the tribute rolls later copied into what we call the Codex Mendoza, somewhere around 4,000 tons of chia flowed into the capital every single year. Whole provinces were taxed in this seed. Think about that. Not gold, not jewels. A seed you can hold 100 of in your palm, carried by the ton, by hand, over mountains, because the empire ran on it the way a modern country runs on oil. Strength, money, food, that is already 3 pillars. But the 4th is where the story turns dark. Because Chia was not only in the marketplace, it was in the temple. The Mexica lived by a principle of reciprocity, of fair exchange with their gods. In their belief, these gods gave rain, maize, and life. The people gave back offerings, and Chia was one of those offerings. In the sacred books, the rain god and the maize goddess are described as the givers of everything the people ate and drank. And Chia is named among the gifts laid before them. White chia, black chia, wrinkled chia, piled at the foot of the pyramids. But to really feel the weight of this, you have to look at chia's sister crop, amaranth, and a practice the Spanish would never forget. Once a year, during the festival of the war god Huitzilopochtli, the priests did something extraordinary. They ground the sacred seeds into a dough, a paste the Nahuatl sources call tzoali, and they sculpted it into a statue of the god they worshipped. A figure, sometimes larger than a man, eyes of green beads, teeth of corn. And then, at the height of the ceremony, the statue was broken apart, and the pieces were handed out and eaten. The people were consuming the body of their god. One surviving account puts it plainly. They broke up his body of seed dough, and his heart was given to the emperor Moctezuma himself. Now, here is where a careful historian has to slow down. The best documented seed in that god statue is amaranth, not chia, though chia was one of the same sacred offered seeds, and later Spanish writers used the two almost interchangeably as the sacred seeds they offered to their gods. And the darkest detail, the claim, repeated by Spanish chroniclers, that the dough was sometimes mixed or smeared with human blood, even the blood of children, is exactly the kind of claim you should treat with suspicion. Conquerors have always described the people they destroy as monsters, because monsters are easier to destroy. But here is what matters for our story, and what is not in doubt. To the Mexica, these tiny seeds were holy, holy enough to become the body of a god, holy enough to eat as an act of worship. And when the Spanish arrived and saw a people eating what they worshipped as a god made of seed dough, they did not see nutrition. They saw a dark mirror of their own most sacred rite, the Christian communion, performed by people they had decided were damned. And you do not tolerate a mockery of the holy. You erase it. It is the year 1521. The door swings again, and the city on the lake is falling. Hernan Cortés and his allies have besieged Tenochtitlan. Disease has raced ahead of the soldiers. The canals that made the city a wonder are now choked. When the fighting ends, the greatest city in the Americas is a ruin, and a new order is written on top of it, an order that reaches all the way down to what a farmer is allowed to plant. The Spanish understood something that most conquerors understand. To truly defeat a people, you do not only beat their armies, you break the things that hold them together, their schools, their books, their calendar, their gods. And the sacred seeds, the seeds that fed those forbidden rituals, were marked for death. The cultivation of amaranth was outlawed. By some accounts, Cortés promised to personally cut off the hands of anyone caught growing it. Chia, tied to the same banned rites and the same banned gods, was suppressed right alongside it. The fields that had once paid 4,000 tons a year in tribute were pushed toward European wheat and barley, crops that carried no pagan memory, crops a Spanish priest could bless. Let that sink in for a moment. A seed that had helped feed a civilization for thousands of years. A seed that, by modern measures, was extraordinarily good for the human body, was driven toward extinction not because it was dangerous, but because it was holy to the wrong god. This is the quiet horror at the center of Chia's story. Not a poison, not a plague, a deliberate act of forgetting. The empire that ran on this seed was gone, and the new masters wanted the seed gone with it. And for a while, it very nearly was. Here is the part of the story that has no drama in it, and that is exactly what makes it chilling. Chia did not vanish in a single night. Extinction of a crop rarely looks like a fire. It looks like silence. It looks like one fewer field each generation. A grandmother who still soaks the seeds in water. A grandchild who only grows wheat because that is what the new world rewards. The sacred becomes the old-fashioned. The old-fashioned becomes the forgotten. For most of the next 4 centuries, Chia survived only at the edges. In remote highland communities, in a few valleys, the empire's reach never fully reshaped, among peoples like the Tarahumara, famous to this day for runners who cover impossible distances. In those pockets, the seed and its memory were quietly kept alive by the descendants of the very people the conquest had tried to erase. But in the wider world, Chia became a footnote. Botanists filed it away. The great exchange of foods that flowed out of the Americas after the conquest, corn, tomatoes, potatoes, chocolate, vanilla, carried some crops to global fame and left others behind in the dark. Chia was one of the ones left in the dark. It had been money and medicine and worship. Now it was almost nothing. If the story ended here, it would be a tragedy. One more thing the world lost when one people decided another people's sacred things did not deserve to exist. But it does not end here, because the seed was about to come back through the single most ridiculous doorway imaginable. It is the year 1977, and a sacred seed of the Aztec Empire is about to be reborn. As a novelty gift, you grow into the shape of a cartoon animal. An American marketer named Joseph Pedot sees a curious little terracotta figurine at a housewares show. You coat it in a paste of soaked seeds, keep it damp, and within a couple of weeks, the seeds sprout, a green fuzz of growth covering the figure like fur or hair. The seed doing the sprouting? Chia, the same Salvia hispanica, the mexica, taxed by the ton. Pedot buys the rights, and the Chia pet is born. A few years later comes the commercial that will burn itself into a generation's memory. A stuttered, sing-song jingle, Ch-ch-ch-chia. It is silly, it is unforgettable, and it sells. Over the decades, Americans buy something like 25 million of them. Sit with the strangeness of that. A seed once holy enough to be shaped into the body of a war god is now shaped into a green-haired novelty ram sold in a drugstore. A seed a European empire tried to erase from the earth. Becomes a punchline on late-night television. The empire that outlawed it is long gone. The seed is now a cartoon. But here is the twist inside the twist. Millions of people were now growing chia in their kitchens as a toy. They had the seed in their hands. They had simply forgotten what it could do. All it would take was for someone to look at the fur on that little clay ram and ask a different question. Not, what does this seed grow into? But what happens if you eat it. And when they finally asked that question, the answer rewrote the label on every health food shelf in the world. By the early 2000s, nutrition science had caught up to what Aztec warriors had known by instinct. Chia turned out to be extraordinarily dense, rich in fiber, in plant protein, in minerals like calcium and magnesium, and loaded with a type of omega-3 fatty acid, the same family of fats we chase in oily fish. That gel the seed forms in water, the trick that let it fuel runners across mountains, now made it a favorite for people trying to feel full, steady their blood sugar, and eat better. The word they reached for was superfood, and the marketing wrote itself. Ancient, natural, the fuel of Aztec warriors. Chia went from novelty pet to premium pantry staple. It appeared in smoothies, in puddings, in energy bars, in bread. The seed that had been almost erased was suddenly everywhere again, sold back to the modern world at a premium price. Its dark history sanded down into a single friendly word on the front of the bag. And that is the part worth stopping on. Because the version of chia you know, the clean, wellness, omega-3 version, is not the whole seed. It is the safe half of the story, the half that sells. The other half, their god made of dough, the ceremony the Spanish could not forgive, the order that pushed a sacred crop to the brink of extinction, was left out of the marketing, because horror does not move product. But the seed remembers. It always did. It survived the conquest that tried to erase it, survived 4 centuries of silence, survived being turned into a joke, and came back to sit, quietly, in your kitchen. So let us close the door where we opened it. Go back to that bowl on your counter, yogurt, berries, a spoon of tiny, gray and white speckled seeds swelling slowly in the milk. It looks like nothing. It looks like health and convenience, and a trend you half remember starting a few years ago. But you have walked through the door now. You know what you are looking at. You are looking at the tax of an empire. You are looking at the fuel of armies that moved without wheels or horses. You are looking at a seed that was ground into the body of their god and eaten in worship. And that a conquering power judged so dangerous to the soul that it tried to erase it from the world entirely. It outlived all of them. The priests who blessed it, the soldiers who banned it, the marketers who turned it into a pet and then into a fad. And now it sits in your hand, waiting, exactly as it waited in a basket in Tenochtitlan 5 centuries ago. That is the thing about the small stuff at the bottom of the bowl. The ordinary things we barely notice are almost never ordinary. They are just stories we have been told to forget. Chia was worshipped, outlawed, forgotten, mocked, and resurrected. The label only tells you the last part. If a seed in your smoothie hides a story this dark, imagine what is hiding in the rest of your kitchen. There is another everyday thing on your shelf with a history soaked in blood and empire. And it is waiting for you right there on the screen. Go on, open the next door.